Good morning, deputies. It's really incredibly wonderful for us to all be able to connect today. And I can say that in the history of the Board of Deputies for 260 years, this is our first ever virtual meeting. So I want to congratulate you all. And I can see that we have at the moment 163 participants, and I'm sure that will go up. So thank you so much for all the effort that you have made. For the first time also, we have to meet under very sad circumstances as a result of the global pandemic and the coronavirus. And during this time, I want to pay tribute to everyone. The work of the Board of the Deputies has indeed continued, and this has been a vital time for all of us. Although we have been socially isolated, through virtual technology, we have been able to connect, and that has been an incredible help to those facing isolation and loneliness. It's created an incredible toll on all of our communities, and I'm very proud of the way that as a community we have come together at this very difficult time, not only just with the Board of Deputies, but also with all of the communal organisations and other faith and communities throughout the UK. So I say thank you to all of you and for all of the work that you have done. Thousands have died in our country, and this has been extremely hard. Thousands, as we know, have also died in the Jewish community. Some 356 people in our community have died, and that includes, I want to say, Rabbi Avraham Pinter. This is very much a personal tragedy. Every death is an absolute tragedy, but I have been extremely saddened by his passing, and he was a much loved figure across the whole community, building bridges between our community and beyond that into different faiths and government. He was one of a kind and can never be replaced. My heart goes out to all of you who are grieving for lost friends, family, and loved ones. I also want to pay tribute to the amazing work of the NHS and everyone who has helped in this amazing effort. But so many have fallen. I would like to have 1 minute's virtual silence. So in a second, we will have the virtual silence, and then Gillian will signal to me that the 1 minute has concluded. So can we please start the virtual silence? Thank you. Deputies, thank you very much. We are due shortly to have Mark Regev address us, but before that, could I please ask Gillian Meron if she can explain the practical steps in having this virtual meeting. So I'll hand over please to Gillian, and thank you, deputies.
Thank you, Marie, and good morning to everybody who's been able to join us. We're thrilled to see you in name, if not directly. And I just want to emphasise what Marie said. This is the first time in our 260-year history that we are online for a meeting. And so I hope people will be patient. I'm sure you will. It is a first time for everybody. We have tested everything, we've practiced. And thank you to all the deputies who gave up time to be trained. We've been very happy to do that for you. And of course, as I say, it is the first time. So there may be glitches, so we will all learn from that. This is being run, as you know, and these are the guidelines that were sent out to you, but I'll quickly go through them, Marie, for everyone's benefit. This is being run as a Zoom webinar. Many of you are familiar with Zoom, but a webinar is a bit different, as anyone will know. And I first of all want to assure you about the security. Obviously very important. Only registered deputies have been able to register to attend and to participate. As usual, this is being live streamed and it is also being recorded. So we are as public and as transparent as we always are. You will, throughout the meeting, be able to see what you can see now, which is the honorary officers, myself, and two board meeting administrators who I would like to introduce to you so you know who they are. So if they could put their take down the holding picture so that we can see you. So we can now see Judy Silkoff, who is our Director of Operations. And I hope we'll be able to see Leo, yes, Leo Mindell, who, as you all know, you're used to seeing Leo and his family who help us with the live streaming. And I would like to say thank you very much to Judy for making this possible and for working so hard on it, and for working with Leo, who, as always, is such a tremendous support and does this voluntarily for us. And we're extremely grateful to you, Leo, in fact, the whole of the Mindell family. So thank you both. But throughout the meeting, you will not see them as you are now. So we will go back to how we usually are. As you will know, anyone who's done a webinar, attendees, if you would like to speak, what you do is you use the raised hand function. So you don't literally raise your hand, you do it through the virtual function, which you will find in the webinar control bar. And again, you'll see all this in the guidelines that were sent to you. If you are called to speak, the administrator will let you be seen and heard by everybody. And I would suggest that you wait until Marie invites you to speak, because she'll be able to see when you're on the screen and also when you've been unmuted so that you can go. You will be temporarily logged out and automatically logged in. You don't need to do a thing. But as I say, perhaps I would advise you just wait till Marie says to go ahead, and as just like you are at a board meeting, if you could introduce yourself with your name and who you represent. And then when the interaction is completed, you as the attendee will go back to being the status of the attendee. So I hope that that helps. If you've got any queries, they're all answered in the guidelines that were sent out with the board papers. And of course, Marie will remind people as we go along, but we will be patient, and I'm sure you'll be patient. So here's to an exciting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gillian. And again, I would like to thank you for your patience, and we hope to have a very productive board meeting today. Now, can I say, deputies, we are very, very lucky and very proud that Mark Regev, Ambassador for Israel, has agreed to speak to us today to address us, and we are going to all celebrate together Yom Ha'atzmaut. Now, afterwards, Mark has agreed to ask questions, but you will appreciate that I will still have to manage time carefully, and I will try and pick balanced questions and try to have people, as always, that haven't spoken before. Can I also say for today, for housekeeping, that you will be able to speak for 2 minutes. You can either ask a question or you can make a statement. So we really hope that this will be a very productive and interesting morning for you. I can say that we've now gone up to 169 attendees. So I would like to say very well done. And I'm going to shortly hand over to Mark Regev, and then afterwards you will be able to ask questions. So I will go into the attendees list, and if you put up your virtual hand, I will then say who can ask the question. And when you come on screen, can you please repeat your name and your constituency? And you have got 2 minutes, and we have an excellent surprise for you, deputies. You will still be seeing your traffic lights, so you will know when your 2 minutes are up. And of course, if you exceed the 2 minutes, apologies in advance, deputies, but you will be virtually turned off, because we will have to move on. So there's no disrespect intended. We're managing this virtually. So thank you. Over to you, Mark. Thank you.
Good morning. And I'd like to thank the President and the board for inviting me to speak to you on this historic occasion where you are doing your first ever digital meeting of the board. I suppose it's not necessarily a matter of celebration, because ultimately it is a very difficult time. And what you said before, Madam President, about the high rate of deaths in the Jewish community in Britain is astounding. It's an appalling figure, over 350. I mean, the truth is that's more than all the deaths we've had in Israel. I'd like to express my solidarity, my empathy with the Jewish community of the United Kingdom. This has been and is a difficult time. With that, I suppose I should announce or share with you the good news, which is that this past week, Israel celebrated our 72nd Independence Day, 72 years of an independent Jewish state. Now, normally I'd be doing a reception. Normally I'd be with you to celebrate. That is, of course, impossible this year, but I think we should never forget, despite the current crisis with coronavirus, I think we should never forget the big picture, which is Israel is an amazing success story. If you think about it, 72 years ago, David Ben-Gurion declared our independence on a Friday afternoon in Tel Aviv. And he was asked not to do it by our American friends, because they said, if you declare independence, the neighboring Arab countries will invade and you will not succeed and you will lose, and we're not coming to help you. And therefore, the American Secretary of State sent a clear message to Ben-Gurion saying, put off declaring independence, don't do it for your own good. Well, Ben-Gurion didn't heed the advice of the Americans and went ahead and declared independence. And the Americans were half right, because that very night, the Egyptians already bombed Tel Aviv. And on the very next day, Israel was invaded by our neighboring countries. From the north, they attacked from Syria and Lebanon, from the east, from Transjordan and Iraq, and from the south, from Egypt. But where the Americans were wrong is that Israel survived. Israel did survive the attack. And not only over the past 7 decades has Israel survived, Israel has flourished. I mean, today we are a strong country. Our economy is robust, one of the fastest growing in the developed world. Israel's population is 9 million people, up from 600,000 when Ben-Gurion declared our independence in 1948. And of course, as members of the board know, Israel is a robust and thriving democracy. Maybe too much so over the last year, where we've had 3 elections in 12 months. But in a region which is plagued by despotism, by different forms of autocracy, Israel stands out as a beacon of freedom, of tolerance, and of democracy. And that's something I think all Jews can be very proud of. Now, if we're talking about Israeli democracy, I should give you, I suppose, this morning a brief update on what's going on in Israel. Because as you know, it appears that we have finally got a government after 3 elections, a government of national unity, which has the 2 largest parties in it. It's not a done deal yet, but it could be by the end of the week, with the center-right bloc headed by the Likud and the center-left bloc headed by the Blue and White Party agreeing to do a national unity government based on parity. Now that means in the cabinet itself, there is a 50-50 division between the 2 blocs, between the center-left bloc and the center-right bloc, with no bloc having a majority, meaning all decisions taken in this new Israeli government will have to be based on consensus. That's the same for the entire government. That's the same for the security cabinet. That's the same for all ministerial committees. In other words, you'll have the right of center bloc led by the Likud, but with also the parties closer to the Likud, together with 50% on the other side, Blue and White together with the Labour Party. They will be a government based on parity. Prime Minister Netanyahu will be the Prime Minister for the next 1.5 years, and according to the agreement signed, the second 1.5 years, he will become the Deputy Prime Minister, and the leader of Blue and White, Benny Gantz, the former Chief of Staff of our military, will become the Prime Minister, Netanyahu becoming, as I said, the Deputy. In the first 1.5 years, Gantz is the Deputy. It's a strange sort of coalition from the point of view of the British, but less so for the Israelis, because in the 1980s, and maybe some of you recall, we had a similar government based on national unity and on parity between then the Likud and the Labour Party, which lasted for 4 years. Shimon Peres was the Prime Minister for the first 2 years, and Yitzhak Shamir was the Prime Minister for the second 2 years. Once again, a government based on parity with the 2 blocs, 50-50 relationship. Now, I think the real choice before the politicians in Israel was clear. Either we had to go to a 4th election, or we had to have a national unity government. And I think the politicians chose it's best to have a national unity government, especially if we're facing this terrible corona challenge. Having said that, it's not just my opinion. I've seen polling from the Israeli public, and it appears that the majority of Israelis also did not want a 4th election and chose and prefer to see this national unity government. And it'll be now the challenge of this government when it is formed, I think in the next immediate period, to show that it is up to the task and to give the country good government. So far on the way we've handled the coronavirus crisis, I think by many international criteria, Israel can be proud of the way we've dealt with the crisis. For all sorts of reasons, our death rate in Israel is very low. We're talking somewhere around 230 Israeli casualties, deaths from this terrible virus. And out of a population of 9 million, that's a very, very low number compared to other comparable countries. Maybe it's a bit easier for Israel because we only have that one international airport. Maybe it's a bit easier for Israel because our border crossings, as you know, with the neighboring countries are not as used as much as other border crossings are across the world. And so maybe that gives Israel some advantages, but there's no doubt that Israel has taken steps from the very beginning of this crisis to make sure that we were ahead of the curve. I'll give you one example, and then I'm happy to answer questions about this or any other topic. But when this crisis broke in February, my colleague in Seoul, the Israeli ambassador in South Korea, was called into the South Korean foreign ministry, and they were upset with him because at the time the Israeli government had decided not to allow flights from South Korea into Israel. And they said to him in the South Korean foreign ministry, they said to my ambassador there, they said, we're friendly countries. We've got a good relationship. Why are you doing this to us? Why have you prevented flights coming in from South Korea? And my ambassador had to say, well, we are friends and we're allies and we cooperate and we have good trade, but this is a matter to help prevent the spread of the disease and to save the lives of Israelis. Now, at the time, I think the South Koreans didn't understand the decision. There's no doubt as the weeks passed that they did. And what Israel did at the very beginning, I think in the end helped us save lives today. And one of the reasons we've kept the rate of fatalities in Israel remarkably low by being very, very strict, very robust and very quick in our response as a country. I hope we manage to continue to keep the death rate very, very low. I thank you for giving me the introductory remarks, and I'm happy now to answer questions on these and any other questions.
Thank you very much. So I apologise if this doesn't run smoothly, but we're going to try to. And remember, please, 2 minutes. And can I remind you that you are still responsible for your conduct? You're responsible for what you say. So thank you very much. Could Norma Frankel please ask the first question? Do we have Norma? Can Norma unmute? Welcome, Norma. Would you like to ask your question? You are visible now on the screen.
Actually, I haven't got a question. I don't quite know what's happened to my computer. I'm sorry about this.
No problem, but would you like to ask a question? Or would
Not
you like
at the moment, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Richard Cohen, could you please ask a question? And deputies, if you put your virtual hand up, it means I think that you want to ask a question. Richard Cohen.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Ambassador.
Could you state your name and your constituency, please, as usual?
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm Richard Cohen, Deputy for Loughton Federation. I watched the webinar last Sunday about the San Remo conference, and it finished with Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that the Trump plan gives Israel sovereignty over Judea Shomron. The Trump plan, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has enthusiastically endorsed, also makes not just dozens, but scores of references to a state of Palestine. So my question is, how can that inference that there will be a state of Palestine on the one hand be reconciled or correlated with Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that Israel has sovereignty over the whole of Judea and Shomron? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Richard. And I like the picture of the young Churchill that was on your screen at the very beginning. For people who are historic buffs like myself, you made me smile. If I can sort of correct one thing you said, we have not accepted the plan. In other words, Israel has not taken the Trump plan and said, yes, we accept it all. On the contrary, we've accepted it as a basis for talks. We've welcomed it, but we haven't signed on the bottom line. In other words, it's not that the Israeli government has adopted this plan. Yes, this is the American plan, and we've welcomed it, and we're willing to negotiate on the basis of it. But anything more than that can't be said at this stage. Now, on the assumption, and it's a good assumption, that we'll have a new Israeli government in the next few days, then it's not just a matter for Netanyahu himself. As I said in my introductory remarks, it is a matter for the entire government. And as I say, it's a 50-50 government based on parity between the center-right bloc and the center-left bloc. And so any decisions made by the Israeli government will have to be made by consensus. You are correct that Netanyahu has welcomed the plan and that he sees many positive elements in it. And we'll have to see as time goes on how this plays out and how what the Americans put forward. It's clear that we'll be working very closely with the Americans on how to move forward on this effect. When the plan was launched, you'll recall, Richard, that some of the Arab countries were also welcoming. There are actually representatives of 3 Arab governments in the room when the plan was launched by the Americans, all 3 of them Gulf countries. And some of the Arab countries gave interesting, open, even positive responses to the plan. The Palestinians, of course, as you know, have rejected the plan. Some people said they rejected it before it was even launched. But we will see now in the months ahead how this plays out and how we move forward.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from people, if we can, that don't usually ask a question. So could I please go to Noah Libson, and can you please state your name and constituency when asking your question? Thank you. Can you unmute and put your video on, please, Noah? Thank you.
I'm Noah Livson, the under 35 representative for Yachad. I'd firstly like to say thank you very much to Ambassador Regev for addressing us today. I just want to send my best wishes to all the deputies on the call today and hope they're all staying healthy and well. The ambassador spoke just now about the National Unity Government that has recently been formed in Israel. And a component of this agreement is the potential beginning of the annexation of the West Bank. Can the ambassador tell us what this will mean in more detail and how it will affect the two-state solution, which is the policy currently backed by the Board of Deputies? What will any potential annexation look like? Will the Palestinians be given democratic rights, or will there be one legal system for Jews and another for Palestinians? And how can Israel said to be a partner in peace if it is unilaterally annexing territory?
Thank you for your question, Noah. Well, I don't think anyone's talking about annexing the entire West Bank. The Trump peace plan talks about parts of the West Bank that could be annexed to Israel. And specifically, the Prime Minister has been talking about the Jordan Valley, which, as you know, is the strip of land on that runs straight along the Jordan River on the west side of that river. Now, the idea that this should remain part of Israel in final status peace is not just a Netanyahu idea. It actually goes way back, and maybe, Noah, you're aware because you're up on your Israeli politics. This actually goes back to the Alon Plan, which was the policy of the Israeli Labor Party for many, many years. In fact, Yitzhak Rabin, who no one can doubt his commitment to both Israel's security, but also his commitment to trying to find reconciliation with the Palestinians. Yitzhak Rabin, who, after all, signed the Oslo agreements, in his last speech in the Knesset, I think it was October 95, just before his assassination, just before his murder by a Jewish extremist, Rabin spoke in the Knesset about how he saw final status peace with the Palestinians. And in that speech, he said that in any final status peace agreement, he would think the Jordan Valley would have to stay part of Israel for our security. So if Yitzhak Rabin thought that keeping the Jordan Valley was necessary for Israel and not contradictory to the idea of having peace and reconciliation with the Palestinians, I think you could make a very strong argument that they are not contradictory, that this is a matter that can be resolved.
Thank you. Can the next person please to ask a question? Flora Frank, thank you. And it's just like waiting for everybody to walk to the microphone, everybody, whilst we get the person on to ask the question. So thank you for your patience. Flora, can you unmute? If I can't get to you, Flora, we'll have to go on to the next person. You need to unmute and also take off your camera. Okay, for the moment, apologies, Flora. Can we go to people that don't normally speak? Could we go to Eric Harris? And I'll try and come back to you, Flora. Sorry, I'm told that Flora has now unmuted. So Flora, you can ask your question first. Thank you. Well, I'm sorry, it hasn't happened, Flora. So apologies. Can I stick to my original plan, please, Eric?
Can you hear me, Mr. Ambassador?
Yes, I can.
Very well.
Yeah. First of all, I'd just like to make the observation that many of us do not like the expression annexation when we're talking about Judea and Samaria. And many of us consider it reclamation of our historic homelands. But the thought crossed my mind, as I understood from what you said, that certain parts of the Judea and Samaria may stay under Israeli control, would that mean that Arabs living in that area would then become Israeli citizens? You already have almost 20% of your population are Arab or others. Would that create a security risk, having a larger Arab segment within the state of Israel?
Thanks, Eric, for the question. And I relate also part of the previous question that I forgot to answer and I want to answer is the question, what is the status of Palestinians who are in areas that could theoretically be incorporated into Israel? So I think the goal of the government and of the American plan is not to incorporate into Israel any areas where there's a large Palestinian population. The Jordan Valley largely is not populated by the Palestinians in any meaningful way. There are Palestinians who live there, but it's not a huge area. It's not like the big cities in the West Bank. But we have a precedent. In fact, we have more than one precedent because Israel extended Israeli law, as you know, after 1967 to all of Jerusalem. And more recently, we extended Israeli law to the Golan Heights. And in both cases where we extend Israeli law, of course, we offer full citizenship to the inhabitants of those regions. And in Jerusalem and in the Golan, people were offered citizenship. The most recent example in the Golan is viable. So if there is to be the extension of Israeli law to areas in the West Bank, my presumption is that the Palestinians living in those areas will be given the option of full Israeli citizenship. I think that's only fair.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. Could we now please ask Irene Mansfield? Would you like to ask a question?
Yes.
Thank you. Can you state your name and constituency? We can only see half your face, but that's fine.
Is that better?
Yes, don't worry. Please just don't worry. Ask your question. Yeah.
It's Irene Mansfield and I represent Muswell Hill United Synagogue. I'd like a slight deviation but follow up from the last questions. There is undoubtedly some resistance in Galut to the Israeli government's position on whatever you care to call it, annexation, extension of the law, whatever you like to call it. There is some resistance among Jews outside of Israel to the idea. And since you expect and are entitled to expect loyalty and support from Jews outside of Israel, does the Israeli government pay any attention whatsoever to the views of Jews outside of Israel? Although we don't expect you to base your security considerations entirely on that, but we do expect that you take some account of our views. Is this the case?
Of course, we take account of views of of communities in the diaspora, and it's my job as ambassador of Israel to report back to Jerusalem the views of the British Jewish community. But if I can be fair, I don't think the views of the British community are in any way uniform on these issues. Just as you have differences of opinion in the Israeli body politic over different issues, you have very different opinions in the British Jewish community. Anyone who stands up and on partisan political issues and says, I'm speaking for the entire British Jewish community, I think that's obviously a bit much. In this conversation itself, in this brief conversation we've had now, we've heard different opinions from people who represent different Jewish organizations. Now, if you're a smaller Jewish organization, you can have one opinion this way or that way, and that's legitimate. I'm not ever going to tell anyone how they should think on the issues, though I would ask people to respect Israel's democratic processes. Yes, Israel has had elections. We formed a government democratically, and I think people should respect the process there. I think that, that's the Israelis ultimately have to decide these questions. We're the ones we're the ones that will pay the price for any mistakes. Having said that, of course, Jews in the United Kingdom are entitled to their opinions. different organizations. You've got organizations who support the Israeli left. You've got organizations in Britain who support the Israeli right. I think organizations that claim to speak for all of British Jewry, like the Board of Deputies, which is the historic leadership organization of British Jews, has known always how to navigate that and not to have the, to speak for all British Jews, which would be a more consensus position. I have to tell you, in the time I've been here as ambassador, and as some of you know, I'll be finishing in the summer and I'll be replaced. It's time for me to return back to Israel. But I've been very impressed with the strong relationship that this community has with the State of Israel. You compare it to other communities across the planet, the number of Jewish children who go to Israel every year from this community. This year is, of course, the exception because of coronavirus, but the numbers are high. The number of British Jews who regularly visit Israel, who have first-degree relatives in Israel. This is a very, very strong and Zionist community. Now, once again, on the political issue, you can have different positions, but the community as a whole, I think, is one of the most pro-Israel communities that there is on the planet. And I, as an Israeli, appreciate that. And when I have my talk with my successor, whoever he or she may be, I will stress that this is a wonderful community, very attached to Israel, united around its support for Israel. When we get to political issues, whether people in the British Jewish community would have supported Netanyahu or Gantz, I'm sure you get a whole different set of opinions, just as you do in Israel. But once again, I think the challenge of an umbrella group like the board is to say, how do we stay above the fray? How do we unite the community? Because I would argue that anyone who's got a partisan political, very specific opinion on the community, that's all right if you're in a small organization, yes. But a group that, an organization that wants to speak for the whole community has to be aware that there are differences of opinion in the community, and it's important, I think, to express a consensus position.
Thank you. Now, deputies, we do have quite a few of you wanting to ask questions, and I'm really sorry we can't be in a position to ask all of them. So can I will ask people that don't speak as often. Brian Gadala, can you ask your question, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Can you please give your name and constituency?
Yes, I'm Brian Gadala. I represent Finchley United Synagogue. Really, mostly a comment. First of all, Ambassador, thank you very much for your contribution and for all the work that you do on behalf of Israel in this country. I was talking to my daughter on Friday. My daughter made Aliyah 5 years ago and lives with her husband in Rehovot. She is no fan of Netanyahu, I will tell you that. But she on Friday was hopping mad at what she saw as the antics of left-wing groups of Jews living in Chutz La'aretz, trying to influence and dictate to the government of Israel what it should be doing. Her view was very simple. If you want to influence the government of Israel, make Aliyah, come and live in Israel and vote in Israel's elections. And to that, I would add the thought that from my history lessons when I was at school, at the time of the American War of Independence, there was a slogan, no representation without no taxation without representation. I would suggest that the reverse is also true. If you're not prepared to live in Israel, pay your taxes in Israel and contribute to the life of Israel, quite frankly, you can have your opinion, please don't express it.
So Brian, you will send my regards to your daughter in Israel in Rehovot, and I hope she's doing well. I agree with her in that I think, and I think I said that in my remarks, that I think people should respect the democratic choices and democratic decisions taken by Israel, I think by the Israeli people. And after all, as I said, we've had 3 elections in the last year. It's not like the Israeli people haven't been asked their opinion continually. Having said that, I think it's also important to say, as your daughter said to you, that it's very easy to sit from afar and pontificate and to say, I have all the solutions to the answers of the Israelis, the challenges Israel faces. And the truth is, it's everyone's right to pontificate and to have an idea and to have an opinion, yes. But ultimately, it's the Israeli people who, through their democratic choices, will choose the direction of my country. And I think that's only right. And we should be proud of that. As I said in my introductory remarks, there are many reasons scholars have written why Israel shouldn't have been a democracy. Most of the people coming from Israel who came to live in Israel didn't come from democratic societies. They came from Eastern Europe. They came from the Middle East, the parts of the globe which are not known for being democratic. We had a constant security threat, and many political scientists will tell you in times of war, in times of terror, there are tendencies for societies to become more autocratic and less democratic. Yet Israel, over its 72 years of history, has always been a strong and vibrant democracy. I would argue that Israel today is more democratic than any time in its 7-decade history. We're more pluralist, we're more open, we're more tolerant, we're more self-critical than any time in Israel's history. And I think your daughter is correct when she says, yes, that if people feel strongly enough about the issues that they have to speak out. So I'd say to them, do so in Israel. I remember myself, I grew up in a Zionist youth movement. And I remember when I made Aliyah, I came to Aliyah and I said, I'm going to vote the current government out of office because I didn't like them. And that was part of the way I saw issues, yes? And I think that's more of a legitimate position than to sit back and to sort of pontificate from afar. I think that's very important. I think it's also important, I mean, I'm ambassador here, and I'm sure some of you read in the newspaper yesterday, the Council for Arab-British Understanding, CABU, which someone in my embassy a few years ago actually looked at all their social media and discovered they spend more time attacking Israel than encouraging Arab-British understanding. Yes, but their job is to push Arab positions in the parliament. They organized a letter calling on the British government to condemn Israel on the possibility that there could be moving ahead on the Trump plan. And I think over 120 members of parliament signed the letter. So I would hope that members of the Jewish community aren't putting wind in the sails of that sort of activity, because this is not about peace. This is not about reconciliation. This is about a political activity that's designed to hurt British-Israel relations. And the unfortunate truth is that in Parliament, it's sometimes not difficult to get these sort of resolutions passed. Parliament has passed a few years ago already a resolution that says they will accept a Palestinian state even without peace with Israel, which we think is highly problematic. And these groups are very, very active. And I think it would be counterproductive if, as I say, if elements in the Jewish community decide to give a wind in the sails of what ultimately are people who are not interested in peace. They're interested in pushing an anti-Israel agenda. And anyone who isn't sure what I'm talking about, they should look exactly who these groups are, groups like CABU.
Thank you for that question. We're now going to move on to the last question. Apologies, deputies, we haven't got time for all of your questions, but those of you that can't ask a question, if you want to ask another question, I will try and give you priority. And after the last question, I will be asking Sheila if she can give the vote of thanks. So Vicky Harris, could you please come to us virtually to ask your question?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Good morning, colleagues, and good morning, Your Excellency, our Ambassador from Israel. And thank you for your words of support. I represent the Hampstead Garden Suburb Synagogue, which is part of the United Synagogue. My question is really relating to whether Israel pays any attention to remarks made by substantial donors from the UK community to Israel, who believe that they have the right to go into press criticizing the Israeli government. I'd be interested in any comments you may wish to make on that matter. You have probably read the article in question, which I must say horrified me, as this person does not represent the Jewish community at all. As you say and have acknowledged, the Jewish community has a mixture of views in it, and the board itself is careful to maintain solidarity with a mixture of its representatives and not take one side or the other.
Thank you, Vicky. I would say, of course, we listen. It's our job to listen. And since arriving here, I've made an effort to visit as many synagogues as possible, not just from the United Synagogue, but from the other movements as well. I've made an effort to reach out to the community and speak to all the different organizations. Some organizations that are routinely critical of the Israeli government, I'm happy to engage with them as well. I believe I'm the ambassador of Israel to the United Kingdom. I'm also the ambassador to the community, and I'm the ambassador to all parts of the community, not to just one part of the community. My job is to engage with everyone. And I think, Vicky, I've been to your synagogue, and I've been to many others, and I'm always happy to discuss the issues. I don't believe that we should run away from a discussion. And it's also my job, as I said before, to report back to Israel what I see as the opinions of British Jewry. That's part of my job description. I do agree with you, Vicky, that I think anyone who stands up and say British Jews believe A or B on this particular partisan issue, yes, I think that's a certain amount of hubris in that, because I don't think all British Jews are on, as I say, would vote for one particular candidate in Israel uniformly over another. Where we can say British Jews agree, and I think this is ultimately very positive, is on the issues of Israel's right to exist in freedom, to defend itself, the idea that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, that they want to see a stronger relationship between the United Kingdom and Israel. I think on those consensus positions where you have wall-to-wall support amongst British Jews, those are issues that I think community leadership should be proud to espouse, and to standing up to anti-Israel hatred. One of the problems I've had with the terrible crisis we had last year over anti-Semitism is that the bar became so low that if a leader condemned anti-Semitism, he was automatically, for want of a better word, kosher. Yes, but the truth is, to condemn anti-Semitism is a very low bar indeed, because of course you would condemn, any normal, rational person would condemn anti-Semitism. But the discussion is on Israel. Yes, to what extent are people willing to show solidarity with Israel that the Jewish community does automatically every day? And once again, we know that there are many people in this country who are friends of Israel. We know there are many people in this country who are not in favor of a strong UK-Britain Israel relationship. And I think the Jewish community should be very standing up and strong and saying we support a strong, robust relationship with Israel, even if we don't agree on all the political issues. Ultimately, and I think I said something like this, you know, when I arrived here over 4 years ago in the United Kingdom, I think the first public body that I addressed was the board. And I remember saying in that discussion, and maybe I should repeat this because this could be my last formal discussion with the board, is that British people, yes, proudly talk about British values and British values of tolerance and democracy and separation of powers and so forth. Yes, I mean, this goes back to the British Parliament being the mother of all parliaments and the Magna Carta being one of the founding documents for modern democracy. And so British people pride themselves on these values. And so when British people look at the Middle East, yes, a vast landmass from Morocco on the Atlantic shore through to countries like Iraq, close to Central Asia on the border with Afghanistan and Pakistan. When British people look at that vast landmass of how many countries and how many millions of people, there's only one country in that entire region that actually practices the values that British people hold dear, that actually has regular elections, that has a free press, that has a free trade union movement, that has independent and free academic institutions, that has separation of powers. And that country is the country I'm proud to represent here as ambassador. And I know that the British Jewish community as a community is proud of their relationship with Israel, of their attachment with Israel, and as a consensus position knows that British Jews feel a fundamental solidarity with Israel and will not play into the hands of those in this country who want to try to undermine the relationship between London and Jerusalem.
Thank you, Mark. I'm very grateful. Can I now please hand over to Sheila to give you a very well-deserved vote of thanks. And on my part, I want to thank you for everything that you've done and for taking the time to address all of us today. Sheila.
Thank you, Marie. So Mark, good to see you. Thank you at this unprecedented occasion where, you know, as Marie said, 260 years, this is the first time we've ever done this, and it is so appropriate that you are the person to address us this way, especially with Israel's 72nd birthday, Yom Ha'atzmaut. And thank you for coming, for updating us with the political situation, for the coronavirus situation, and for taking some really interesting and questions that helped clarify the position on the Trump peace plan and the suggested annexations. So thank you. We wish you well for the future. We will be sad not to see you. I'm sure we will at some point. And listen, stay safe, stay well, and give our best wishes to all your family. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. You're very welcome to remain, of course, virtually for the rest of the meeting. Thank you. Deputies, can I move on, please, to the minutes of the board meeting held on the 15th of March. I have not been notified of any amendments. I'm looking at the list of hands, and if anybody has got their hand up to propose any amendments, I will tell you. There are not, so thank you very much. Can I also move on to the executive report that you've also been sent? I've not been notified of any questions, and of course we will come on to the President's statement and the divisional report. So I don't have any hands up there, so thank you. We can all move on. I'm going to now start the President's statement. Can I again say that this has been an extremely difficult time for the community, and as of Friday there have been 361 deaths in the community, which is extremely hard, and very few of us do not know someone who hasn't either been seriously ill or died. I again want to pay tribute, and I would in particular like to pay tribute to some of the deputies that have suffered losses, and I'm going to read these out because this is very tough, and we at the Board of Deputies, we're like a family. Jerry Lewis on the death of his mother, Robin and Gary Mond on the loss of their sister and sister-in-law, Ian Goldrain on the loss of his father, Neville Goldrain, a deputy for many years, Sylvia Sheff, MBE, former deputy as well in Manchester, Gary Abrams on the loss of his mother, Sybil, Victor Huglin on the loss of his brother, Professor Malcolm Hugin, David Behrens on the loss of his mother, Nathan Baroda on the loss of his grandmother, and Naomi Terberg on the loss of both her father and brother-in-law. And again, we recognise the very sad loss that's occurred both throughout the UK and worldwide. There are some Mazel Tovs, so let's also celebrate Jonathan Metzlis, Mazel Tov again on a granddaughter. That's great news, and also to Sid Brahm on the birth of a grandson. So thank you very much for that indeed. Can we also, on our first ever virtual meeting, I want to welcome a new deputy. The new deputy is Shmuel Yosef Davidson. I would like you all, I hope, to welcome him, and I want to tell you that he's representing South Tottenham United Synagogue, and Shmuel Yosef is a resident of the Stamford Hill and Tottenham South community, Haredi community, and I'm very sure that you will all appreciate the significance of him joining us on the board. He is the founder and director of Havarim Youth Organisation. He works extensively with CST as the Stamford Hill liaison and is very active in local politics in Haringey. And I'm very pleased to say he's already been very hard at work this week. He's joined Vice President Edwin Shuker and representatives of the Haredi community from Stamford Hill, Gateshead and Canvey Island at a meeting with the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, to talk about scrapping the 2-child cap on welfare benefits and tackling anti-Semitism in Labour. And I hope that you will join me in making Shmuel Yosef most welcome as a new deputy. So thank you, deputies. If we come on to the President's statement, which of course you've all read, I want to go over some particular points to discuss with you. I want to thank deputies in particular for volunteering. I think there's been a huge contribution by the Board of Deputies that's risen to the great challenges. We've liaised very early on with the government, the opposition and the Muslim communities in relation to the coronavirus bill, Schedule 27, and we helped bring about a very rapid change in the law, which may have made it mandatory for people to be cremated. So all credit to everybody involved there. And we've been working very hard with all the denominations, and frankly we've all been doing our bit, whether we've been volunteering through the NHS, through our amazing Jewish organisations and the Jewish Volunteering Network. We as deputies have also done our bit. You'll remember our card to be downloaded at the beginning, I Can Help You card, and I know that many people, as I've said, have risen to the challenge, and that has been a great communal effort. During this very difficult time, the Board of Deputies has also made it an absolute priority to want to support the regions, and in that light we have engaged Sarah Radivan to support the regional communities in the context of the coronavirus, and her role is the Koach manager, and of course Koach, you will all know, has the meaning of strength. And we want to really stress to all of you that we support you all wherever you are in the United Kingdom, and we want to make sure that there's somebody near you that can provide local support and regional help, and that we are all in this together. We are a big family, a very, very important community, and any of you that want to contact Sarah, I put her details on the President's statement. So I hope that you will look at her very favourably and want to engage. And you can also, of course, contact Edwin. So we would like to also welcome her to the board at this very, very difficult time. We have spoken also, you will have read during the week the article that was in the press. I want to just come on to that about managing disagreement. You've all seen the, I'm sure, the reference in the Jewish News and the Jewish Chronicle to comments that were made, and it's fine for us to disagree and for deputies to disagree with each other. But what wasn't fine, to be frank, was putting up comments about the staff, insinuating that they can't do their jobs because of their political leanings. And this was cowardly, and this letter, apparently signed by 20 deputies, was anonymous. And we all know that the staff were not in a position to defend themselves. And I have to say, on behalf of the whole honorary officer team, if any deputy wants to say anything, then of course they're very welcome to do so, whether or not, but we don't expect our deputies to be in the shadows. We expect people to be able to stand by the strength of their convictions. This is also contrary to the Code of Conduct, paragraph 2, which requires deputies to respect the staff and also not to harass the staff. And I hope that never again will we see deputies attacking the staff in the press and depriving them of the opportunity to respond. And that's something that's really affected the whole staff team and the honorary officer team at a terrible time when we're all doing our very, very best to work for the community in unprecedented, difficult times. So we hope that this will draw a line under that, but we hope never have to raise this again. I'm sure that I'm going to have a number of questions in relation to the President's statement, and I'm going to again give preference to people that haven't asked as many questions, so that we can then hear from people, different people. So could I please ask Mark Edelman? And just to remind everyone, whilst we're waiting for Mark, you will have deputies 2 minutes. You are responsible for everything you say and your own personal conduct. And in your 2 minutes, you can either ask a question or you can make a statement. So just while we're waiting.
Yeah. Yes, can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Good. Right. My name is Mark Edelman. I'm representing the Lincolnshire Jewish community. Speak for the first time on the to the board. I'm speaking from Australia, actually, Western Australia, and I might not be the most distant delegate, but I'm one of the ones who actually enjoying the screening very much. I've also just celebrated a birthday, 72nd birthday last month. So I'm in that case, I'm with Israel on that in that respect. But what I'm really speaking about is the timing of the meetings. This meeting that we're having is ideal for me because, you know, it's 6 o'clock. It's 7 o'clock, 7:20 in Western Australia, and you know, it's ideal. But if as will happen next month, the meeting moves to the winter summertime, which is 3:30 on, it will be very difficult for me to watch or to participate because I'm actually it'll be actually in the middle of the night. But also before I came out here, I was affected by the timing of the meetings during the winter because on Sunday mornings it's very difficult to get down from Lincolnshire. There are lots of road works on the main line to the East Coast main line, and I think a lot of people would find it difficult to get down in time for the meeting. I would certainly not be able to go to the meeting. I would have had to have stayed in London overnight, possibly 2 nights.
I'm very sorry. You've reached your 2 minutes. There's no disrespect what intended to you. I've got the gist of your concern, and it's always very, very difficult in the UK to have meetings at times that suit everybody. Certainly, if we're going to have more virtual meetings going forward, we can look at timings much more easily. But usually, if we have a meeting, it involves a lot of travel from the lots of deputies. But we are delighted today that you were able to join us, and in fact we have a very, very good media presence today. I've been told that we have the Jewish Telegraph and the Jewish News online, also online from Facebook and social media, now Australia. So that is something that we will be looking at going forwards. Could I please next ask Ira Khan? Would you like to ask a question?
Hi. Thank you,
Hello.
Marie. Hi. It's actually
Hi.
Russell.
It's
I come up as Ira.
hello, Russell.
There's another question. It's by way of a mini statement, if I may. Just wanted to pick up on your comment about the appointment of Sarah Radivan. Speaking on behalf of the whole of the Manchester Jewish community, just to say how grateful we are, how much we appreciate the effort of the board in appointing Sarah at this particularly difficult time. She's hit the ground running, as many of your colleagues know, and we are looking forward to working with her during this initial period, and hope that if everything works well and it's really successful, which we're sure it will be, that hopefully an appointment, if not her as an appointment, will be made permanent. So I just really wanted to thank the board. I know it's taken a long time in its gestation, but we really want to express publicly our thanks for everything that the board has done in this particular area and for what it's doing elsewhere. You know, we're all working extremely hard, and we need all the help that we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you for very that. Thank you. I can see that Louise Ellman would like to speak. So Louise, would you like to come on screen? Once again, it's just like coming to the microphone, so we're just having a very slight delay whilst we wait for Louise.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Over to you.
Right, thank you. Louise Ellman, Jewish Labour Movement. I welcome very much the meetings, the virtual meetings that the board has held with other Jewish organisations, with Keir Starmer, the new leader of the Labour Party. The initial signs from Keir Starmer are very encouraging. I think we have an entirely different person now, putting an entirely different view forward and with a completely different attitude and a genuine determination to deal with the horrendous anti-Semitism we've all experienced in the Labour Party. But this is only a beginning. And there is a long way to go. And I think we've all seen from developments over recent days that the pro-Corbyn factions within the Labour Party are fighting back, and they're not going to give Keir Starmer an easy time. However, I do feel confident that he will win through in the end. But I think it is very important indeed that the board maintains the pressure on Keir Starmer and maintains communication so that together we can deal with anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and of course elsewhere as well, but I'm focusing now on within the Labour Party, on the virulent anti-Semitism there's been, together with the very extreme anti-Zionism that sometimes is a cover for anti-Semitism. So I'd be interested to know in any future plans that the board have with other Jewish organisations to address this very important issue. But I'm very pleased with what's happened up to now. And I think it's very important that a very strong stand was taken.
Thank you, Louise. I think what Louise said, two words spring out to mind: pressure and communication. In relation to pressure, we've all agreed, I think, that it was a very, very good start. Keir Starmer wrote to the Board of Deputies on the very, very first day that he was elected. We can't ask for any quicker than that, making it clear that he wanted to rid the party of the poison of anti-Semitism. On the following Monday, he arranged a series of communal meetings. And I would like to stress, although it's been only reported in places, that the board attended the shadow cabinet meetings. For Keir Starmer, of course, we had the Jewish Leadership Council, the CST and the Board of Deputies, and also in relation to Lisa Nandy, to also say that the Jewish Leadership Council ourselves and Labour Friends of Israel also attended those meetings. We've made it clear, and I will repeat this again and agree with Louise, this is just a beginning. It was a positive start, but there were already substantial concerns on Friday, and deputies will have seen the statement that's had to be made. And I'm still waiting to hear what's actually going to happen, because a mild apology or a statement of regret, simply to be frank, isn't good enough, and it's a complete breach of the 10 pledges which Keir Starmer freely signed up to. And the 10 pledges are going to be used as a roadmap and plan to hold the Labour Party to account. So we're all on the same page on this. All the communal organisations are agreed that this is a start, and this is going to be a long haul. If anybody thought this was going to be a very quick apology, then that's not the position. And let's also remember that Keir Starmer also said that one of the signs of success would be, and he particularly said Louise, if Louise decides to rejoin the Labour Party. So we will all see when Louise feels satisfied that these criticisms are being addressed. And meanwhile, I'm afraid the Board of Deputies and myself in particular is being attacked by the hard left in the Canary. So we are in quite a difficult place. There clearly is a lot going on between the far left and Sir Keir Starmer as well in the Labour Party, but we're not going away. We are going to be as vocal as ever. So thank you very much, Louise. Can I come on to David Jewell? Could you please ask your question, and please state your name and your constituency. Can you please turn up your videos? Thank you, David. We can see and hear you.
Thank you very much, President. David Jewell, representing Bristol and West Progressive Jewish Congregation. I haven't been on the board for a number of years. So it's a long time since I made any statements to the board. Just want to say very quickly, I was really shocked to hear of the letter published in the Jewish Chronicle, not by the criticism, but by the anonymity, which always provides an opportunity for people to overstate their position. So I was just wanted to ask whether there's anything specifically in the Code of Conduct. I should have checked, but I'm sorry I haven't. I'd like somebody to check whether there's something specifically in the Code of Conduct to mention that deputies are expected to put their name to any comments made. I mean, this may be unenforceable because if somebody actually chooses to do something anonymously, you may not be able to check them. But I think it's worth stating in the Code of Conduct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. As it happens, I have the Constitution and the Code of Conduct here, and it is a clear breach of the Code of Conduct at Section 2, because deputies have to be respected and not harassed. It certainly is a matter that would be in breach of the Code of Conduct. I can confirm that to you, although, of course, I think online we will have Richard Del Monte, and perhaps we could hear from Richard. I don't know if it's possible, Judy, that if you can reach Richard, if he can confirm if we are able to do this. Thank you. Can you unmute, Richard? Thank you.
Right. Yes, it's Richard Del Monte, acting co-chair of the Constitution Committee. It's not really for the chair of the committee to say specifically if any particular action is definitely in or permitted by or against the Code of Conduct, because obviously that would depend on any case that were brought. So I can't give a ruling on it, but I think clearly where it appears that members of the staff are attacked in a situation where they're not in a position to respond, that is the kind of situation which gives rise to the question as to whether that treats them with respect in that situation. So that's, I think, as much as I can say. But that's the whole of the Code of Conduct is all about treating others with respect, and that covers not only deputies but staff and indeed anyone else. So that whenever you write to the press, you always need to bear in mind whether you are treating others with respect. I don't think I can go beyond that.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And I think it's just, I want to say in relation to the seriousness that I view the attack on the staff, that it was worth discussing the particular generic sections of the Code of Conduct, so that all deputies are aware that the Code of Conduct doesn't apply just to deputies amongst themselves. It also applies as to how deputies treat staff. And there are many situations that, as Richard has explained, that could potentially come within the conduct. But each situation would obviously depend on its own facts. Next, please, would Tao Ofer like to ask a question?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Can you see me? Okay.
We can see you. Please give
Okay.
your name and your constituency, or you can make a statement as you wish.
Yes, this is Tal Ofer from Chigwell and Hainault. Madam President, the reason for my follow-up question is because I feel that I didn't get an answer from you in the President's statement. The board has been dodging tough questions on the occupation and settlement for a long time, and in my view, been paying lip service to the two-state solution. The current position of the board claims that there are two sides for the argument, but I believe it's untenable because annexation of the whole West Bank or part of it will put facts on the ground and will mean the last nail in the coffin of the two-state solution, which would be in direct opposition to the official view of the Board of Deputies. Our constitution requires us to advance the welfare of the state of Israel, and the proposed annexation will do the exact opposite. Don't listen to me, but to all the former heads of security services in Israel who say it. The annexation will also have direct impact on diaspora Jew lives, can trigger far more anti-Semitism and could result in potential international sanctions against Israel and will mean the end of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. Will the board therefore speak up and express our grave concerns to the proposed annexation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tav. Thank you for that. Look, almost all, in relation to the two-state solution, almost all serious peace proposals have included the incorporation of the major settlement blocks in Israel and to safeguarding of Israeli security in the Jordan Valley as part of the final agreement. The question now is what happens to the remaining Palestinian autonomous areas. And it's our hope that these will form the basis of a viable Palestinian state. And of course, whether or not this is feasible will depend upon the key players, not least the Israelis and the Palestinians themselves. And the Board of Deputies represents the views and the interests of the UK Jewish community. And as Mark Regev has just said, in the main, this is a Zionist community, and our interests with the Israeli government overlap. However, there are some specific issues, and this is clearly one where there is a wide diversity of views, and we need to try to hold different parts of our community together. That's what we are trying to do. And as we've said, we will not take a view on which towns should be on which side of the border. That's not in the competence of the Board of Deputies of British Jews, and has to be left to the Israeli and Palestinian negotiators. And the Board of Deputies is proud that Israel is both the Jewish and a democratic state, and we convey our beliefs about the importance of maintaining both aspects. We believe in a two-state solution with a secure Israel alongside a viable Palestinian state, and we advocate for peace, security, prosperity, and the equality of all Israel's citizens. Thank you for that question. Adrian Cohen, would you like to ask a question, please? Again, a reminder to state your name and constituency. And you can either ask a question or you can make a statement.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can see me. It's Adrian Cohen, Highgate United Synagogue.
We can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Actually, it segues from Tal Ofer's question just now. and back to this point about the anonymous signed letter, or not signed up, who knows really, the letter criticising the staff of the Board of Deputies based on their affiliations. And I just, what strikes me is a sort of, kind of raises the question, well, what is it that the Board of Deputies has done which is, as its critics would suggest, is particularly left-wing? I mean, based on what Tao has just said, that would suggest the board isn't left-wing at all. Obviously, there are other critics out there who would who obviously believe that the Board of Deputies is for some reason left-wing. Although you mentioned the Canary, there's plenty of left-wing commentary which would suggest otherwise. And I just think what's quite remarkable is if we move away from the ad hominem attacks on the staff based on affiliations, which I think in any other work context would be unacceptable. You know, what do these critics have to say substantively about what the board is doing, which is particularly left-wing? So far as I can see, the board is simply trying to promote an agenda of the community where there is a reasonably recognisable consensus around a whole range of issues. And I think that people who are seeking to portray the board as left-wing or right-wing are really missing the point of how the board functions and what it's trying to achieve. So I'd like to see less of ad hominem attacks on individuals and more, if there's going to be analysis and criticism, perhaps a more qualitative and quantitative analysis of what the board actually does, and that might be a more fruitful activity than what we've seen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Could please Janet Tresman ask a question, and when you come on, please can you unmute, and also can you make sure that you turn your camera off so that we can see you, as well as giving your name and constituency.
Can you hear me?
We can hear and see you. Please proceed.
Janet Tresman, Finchley Progressive Synagogue, deputy thereof. I just wanted to pay tribute to the Federation of Jewish Services and their care homes of our those of our community who are resident there. My 91-year-old aunt is resident in Heathlands in Manchester, in the Heathlands village in Prestwich. She was tested positive, and thank God she came out of isolation on Friday without showing any further symptoms. I know, therefore, that the staff are absolutely devoted, and I can assure you that none of them are flinching from going in and working and looking after our elderly with devotion, care and love. And I would like the Board of Deputies, if possible, to send our very best regards and best wishes for a very speedy recovery of the Chief Executive, Mark Cunningham of Heathlands, who has been off work with COVID-19. He is apparently feeling a little bit better, and that was on Friday. We are getting daily bulletins, the next of kin and friends of Heathlands. May I ask you, and I'm sure this is indicative of all the Jewish care homes, may I ask you to send good wishes for his speedy recovery? And can I ask you please to make donations to the Federation of Jewish Services, because they are having to recruit more care workers, because of course there are absences because they've got the virus, and to show our appreciation in that manner. We are blessed with the care home community and their staff. Thank you.
Thank you. We are running over time, and I've got a lot of questions, which I regret I can't answer them all. I'm going to have one more question, and we are happy to take further questions offline afterwards. The reason that we have to get through today is because we've got constitutional changes to discuss, and Ben Crown will need to address us for 35 minutes, and we are going to have a virtual vote on screen, which is again a first for the Board of Deputies, and we will have an immediate virtual count. So I'm going to apologise hugely that I just simply cannot get to all of the hand ups. Can I hear from Nathan Baroda? Please come to ask your question, take off your camera, and can you unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Good morning.
Hello.
We can hear you. It's a bit patchy. Do your best. Go on.
Thank you. Sorry, the Wi-Fi is definitely patchy. Nathan Baroda, Union of Jewish Students. Can I thank the HOs and staff in the wake of an unacceptable attack? I am worried that we do have currently democracy by letter writing at the board, and I think it's imperative personally that the board does criticise the annexation because it's disgraceful, undemocratic, and a breach of international law. But what I would ask is how the board are judging the views of the community and of deputies on the issue of Israel.
Well, can I say at the present time we've got two petitions. We've got a petition from what's described as the young members of the board. Can I just comment that that expression is actually a bit ageist in my opinion on that. Thank you. And we also have another petition coming, shall we say, from the other side of the political spectrum. As I've said in my previous comments, there is such a huge diversity of opinion in the Jewish community, which is of course reflected in the board as its democratic representative body, and I can only repeat the comments that I've made before. And the board has to be a place where opinions can be expressed without abuse and with tolerance to enable us to have these discussions, because there isn't going to be, unfortunately, a consensus that is going to be reached. And I'm very concerned that the Jewish community stays together as a community at what is clearly a very divisive time. I would also like to comment that during the election, for example, in the UK, we do not comment on the UK election because we are a non-political organisation, and that also applies to Israel. If we don't comment here in the UK, I think it's very difficult to justify us commenting, but we know there are a very wide variety of views, as have been expressed, and you've had the opportunity to ask Mark Regev, and I want to thank everybody for the dignified ways in the main that people have expressed their views, and they are really being listened to, and this is a very, very difficult time for the community. So can I thank you for your question, and I'm going to take just one last question, and I'm so sorry that I can't get to everybody. Kim Cohen, this will be the last question on the President's statement. Thank you. Can Kim please unmute and turn off his camera video?
Oh, can you see me now? Can you hear me?
We can all see you, and we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you very much. Kim Cohen, Northwood United Synagogue. Firstly, may I say, Madam President, that I support your earlier statement and remarks on the antics of writing to the Jewish press, attacking staff in an anonymous way, which is very cowardly. To me, it's almost tantamount to a hit and run accident, and that should never be allowed, whether it's in the Constitution or not, the Code of Conduct. Just from a personal viewpoint, if we're members of the board representing our communities, we should have the decency actually to behave better towards each other, whether it's in the Code of Conduct or not. I'm sorry, I don't even know what's in the Code of Conduct in relation to that particular aspect. So I think that is just purely personal behavior. And that the first thing is, I think that we had, it's a bit of a statement, a lost opportunity with Mark Regev in one of his closing meetings before he goes back to Israel, in that all of the questions were related to politics. The board, as you've just said, is not defined as a political organization. Madam President, that's absolutely right. The board represents community, culture, religion, education, obviously the defense of our traditions in the UK. And of course, it does get into the political domain, because people then start to ask of us, what do we actually think to help them to guide our community towards our UK situation? By extension, obviously, because we are a supportive organization towards Israel, that opens up the complete spectrum of views, right and left wing, as to Israel's politics. Well, the first thing is, no annexation has happened. Nothing has happened yet. Israel has to negotiate. And as everybody knows, it's taken 100 years or 70 years, certainly, for Israel to reach this point. And there's no way that any statements at the moment are definitive. And that, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, but you have exceeded your time, but thank you very, very much. So you have now been muted. With respect, you've been muted. So thank you very, very much. And again, can I apologise to everybody else whose questions we simply were not able to get to, because we have some very important matters to deal with today and a vote. So could I now please hand over to Ben Crown? Would you please unmute and take off your video to address us, please, on the constitutional changes? And I would like to thank Ben for all of his hard work and that of the President's constitutional working team, because they have put a huge amount of hours and effort into coming up with the vision, and not just the vision, we want to and need to implement this change. So this is a very, very practical step for us to be able to move forwards. So Ben, over to you.
Hi, Brooke. Can you hear? Can anyone hear me?
Yes,
okay,
we can all.
You.
You have 182 people hearing you. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, 1 second here.
These things happen, but we're doing very, very well.
Without this, I can see, by the way, which of the HO.
No, we've lost Ben. No.
Okay, how about that?
That's much better. Much
and I can
better.
hear you. It's brilliant.
Good.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone. I now want to complicate things further by sharing my screen. Let's see if we can do that. You should now be able to see a slide. Can everyone now see a slide deck?
I can certainly see it. The Constitution Working Plenary Update. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. I will not take 35 minutes. I will speak in as a succinct and an ordered way as possible, and then throw things open to questions. And we have all the time we need for questions, as we sort of see from the deck I'm running through. I want to start off just by running through what I'm going to do, an update of the consultation, which sort of went out in February, and responses came in February, March through into April. Obviously, we extended the consultations deadline because of all the unpleasantness and craziness going around. An overview of what we in the Constitution Working Group are planning to do over the next 4 or 5 months, what we'd like to do today, and then to get into more detail on what we'd actually like to try and accomplish in today's meeting. So to first start off by just thanking everyone who participated in various ways in the consultation that we had, as you'll have seen from the papers on sent out, I believe, on Wednesday. There were 52 responses to the SurveyMonkey survey. Quantitative, yes, no, approve, disapprove, statistical results. In addition, there are about 20 emails and phone calls which I and various other members of the working group conducted over the course of the survey. Further, we consulted with the FNO on the specific, on specific legal and governance issues. The working group themselves is comprised of about 12 to 15 deputies, and of course we presented as well to the exec and the HO. So my rough count is allowing for double counting. About 90 to 100 deputies have fed into this process so far. That's obviously a minority of deputies, but really sort of quite a substantial one. And I also want to thank really pretty much everyone who's participated. There are a wide range of comments, lots of thoughtful consideration of issues to do with the key legal and governance issues, but also a lot of the other things which the board does. I think pretty much every aspect of the board's work was commented on. As we highlight in the paper, the most common issue that people raised was unprompted was the issue of the conduct of plenaries, which obviously is an issue we're all experimenting on at the moment. But there were questions about pretty much everything: elections, the code of conduct, the regional structure, the registration of new deputies, and so forth. These are things which some of them we've considered in detail, some of them are things which we are working through, sort of at the moment. And it's very, very helpful to get sort of a range of views from such a large number of deputies on it. So everyone's time was appreciated there. Let me see. I'm going to get up, try and get up the papers and see if I can share that as well, that was shared with deputies this week, which will summarize the statistical responses, the survey responses on SurveyMonkey. But to just précis those, we were, here we are. Here is a little, can everyone see that now instead of the PowerPoint, or can people still see the PowerPoint? Can anyone nod if they can see this instead of the PowerPoint? Chat's not working for me. Okay, brilliant. So as everyone who's seen the survey will recall, we put the various proposals in a structured way to deputies, and we said, in terms of legal structures, governance structures, divisions, organisation membership, and so forth, please look through the consultation document. Do you agree? Please comment. Do you disagree? Please comment, and so forth. And although we're not going to sort of just take these and say, oh, well, obviously 94% of all deputies agree with everything we're trying to do with legal structures, the direction of traffic here was very much in favour of support, in some cases overwhelming support, for the proposals, in particular for the legal structures and the governance structures, which are the things we're going to spend time on today. We intend to continue to operate the same way we've run this process to date, consensus-based as far as that's possible, intended to address the long-standing issues which the working group has discussed, which members and deputies have fed in. There are a number of issues which are very important, a number which are more minor but should be addressed at the same time, and we are just working through in a detailed and thoughtful way with as much input from deputies as you all as a group feel are willing to offer. The detailed work is going to continue. Now we have an idea of the shape of what things are going to look like. We have some time today. We're going to have more time in June, more time in July plenaries, and I imagine that some of this will sweep into September, even though we hope by then to have the core structural legal governance stuff tied up and freshly documented. So just to talk through that process in slightly more detail for a minute. Everything, as we know with the deputies, there are a lot of complex structures and a lot of moving parts. The Constitution itself is a very long document. There are lots of parts of board work which are not covered by the Constitution, which is obviously one of the issues we're trying to address. And so a phased approach, we're going to take a phased approach and work through different parts of this work sort of over different time, but at each stage, each part of it will require the same basic steps: discussion, at a plenary, and we'd like to have an approval in principle before we proceed towards drafting, detailed drafting of key documents. First of all, the memorandum and articles of association, the governing documents of the entities, and then later things like standing orders and rules and so forth, which will be drafted in detail and passed back to deputies well in advance of plenaries, and then discussed at plenaries. And then at various points we'll need to have formal confirming votes, which to adopt various rules, various memorandum and articles of association. Eventually, as will become apparent, or should already be apparent for people who've read the papers in detail, we will need to dissolve the current unincorporated association. That's what we're proposing, which is a structure governed by the Constitution. So there will be a process for that as well. We are working through with deputies and with our legal counsel exactly the way that should be structured, the way that should be run, and we will obviously keep everyone informed as we progress. The challenge, of course, being that until we know where we're going, until we have a broad steer from deputies in principle. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, Attila, do you mind? It's 185 deputies can hear you unpacking or shopping. Until we are confident that we know where we're going, that there's a reluctance to go through the large amount of time, the expense, including legal costs, that will take to draft documents until we're confident that these are going to be supported in detail by deputies. And the 3 pots we've proposed to divide things are the legal and core governance issues, which we'd like to start today, bring detailed documents in June, and either in June or July have a vote to confirm. We'll see how discussion goes. The detailed work of governance and membership, things like the advisory council, the proposal for expanded trust board and so forth, the details of membership criteria, those are things which we'll bring back in June and we will spend detailed time on in June and July and heading to September. And then the range of other issues which will need to be addressed through rules, through standing orders and so forth, elections, the conduct of plenaries, regional deputy structures, the code of conduct, onboarding new deputies, a range of other issues, which we will start work on as soon as we've cleared through the fundamental legal and governance stuff. We will start in July probably, we'll run into September, and we will see how far we get. Ideally, it would be marvellous to have everything wrapped up by December or at the latest by the plenary in November. So then we have 7 or 8 months before the next round of elections to make sure everything is implemented and all the processes are in place. But ultimately, we are just putting proposals to you, and we are dependent and contingent on sort of deputy support to move these forward. What I want to do today is to talk through some of that legal and governance documentation. First of all, the current issues that we have. It's the area that is in most urgent need of reform. It's an area where the risks and the consequences of potentially allowing the current structure to continue indefinitely are most urgent to address. And from the survey, we are reasonably confident that this is where deputies are most clearly supportive, and support is most unambiguous for the large majority's proposals. Obviously, we'll see quite soon, we'll get to questions if that's right. I'm going to run through the current issues, I'm going to run through our proposals. This is nothing new. This is stuff that's been in the consultation documents that went out in February. It's in the papers that shared at this meeting, but I will recapitulate, and we will spend as long as deputies need to talk through these issues, discussion and questions. And then what we're asking for is an indicative vote, the vote from deputies in this plenary to agree in principle these proposals, like to agree that proposals as a large set of proposals to shift the board from its current structures to new structures make sense and are agreeable. And that will give us the confidence to go away to draft new governing documents, which is weeks of work for a trained lawyer, not to mention the time of the Constitution Working Group, to input, to feedback and so forth. We're going to be very, very busy. Those will come back to deputies well in advance of the June plenary, ideally by the end of this month. And to deputies will have 3 weeks, hopefully, to consider them, to consult further, to go through the detail, to take questions. We'll come back here in the June meeting. We'll go through everything for as long as it takes, and then we will sort of move towards sort of a vote to adopt the proposals either in June or in July, depending on sort of how these are received. So, with all that kind of as preamble. And again, the slides I'm putting up are summaries of what was in the papers. I can send these around again if these are an easier précis for deputies. The summary of the current issues which we're trying to address there as follows. First of all, the board has a complex structure with a number of overlapping legal entities. The most important of them are the 2 corporate structures, that is the Board of Deputies Foundation, which is a charitable company, Board of Deputies Limited, which is a company, not a charity. In theory, the board's work is, the employment of staff, costs and so forth are split between these 2. And there's a rigorous division between charitable and non-charitable work. That's a line which has been blurred a lot, despite everyone's sort of best efforts on this. And additionally, there is an unincorporated association, this is the best analogy, and I think I mentioned this before in February, is something like a private members club or a sports club or something. Every deputy is, by becoming a deputy, part of it. It has no corporate identity. There is no corporate shield. There is no protection saying, oh, well, there's a legal entity that's not the individual deputies. There is unlimited legal liability for anything that the unincorporated association does. That you would have to ask a lawyer whether that would apply to the exec, as the governing body, or to all deputies. But certainly it's kind of an open question. In the unincorporated association, this is the important thing, does everything that the board does, probably, which relates to deputies and doesn't involve staff. So it is in particular these plenary meetings, it is the disciplinary process, it is the elections involving deputies, it is various other things that staff are employed by the charity and by the company. The HOs are the governing body for those two legal entities. Everything is a bit more unclear with an unincorporated association. I don't want to belabor the point too much, but essentially this meeting now being run by the plenary as a plenary meeting, being run by the unincorporated association, being live streamed out into the world. If anything that was said here, which created a legal liability, which was libelous, which was defamatory in some way, we as a group of deputies would not have a corporate shield to protect us. The deputies who've been around for a longer time may recall, for example, Interpal and the extensive amount of work which the board went into to address that issue at the time. This was one of those issues. Others have come up in the meantime. The unincorporated association, we think, was basically created by mistake in the mid-90s, and our proposal is to remove it by absorbing its functions back into the two legal entities. I mentioned there's a split between two corporate bodies, the charity and the company. In theory, there is a clear line and clear blue water, what is charitable, what is non-charitable. There is a working paper document generated by past President Jonathan Arcus a few years ago, which I know the board monitor and use for things like cost allocations, but still the line is quite blurred. The Charity Commission guidance on these things is very case specific, but they have sort of a strong preference not to have two entities that have very similar names and the same sets of directors, but are purporting to be two different entities. It makes distinctions between the various groups quite difficult. In addition, as part of this weird structure, as part of the anomalous, one of the anomalies about this structure is that deputies have no standing in either legal entities. The deputies only have standing in the unincorporated association and in relation to things the unincorporated association does. So things which are done by staff, things are done by the charity as an entity, by the company as an entity, the route, and I think this is known, the route for deputies to go through to access those things is via the HOs. It goes up out of the unincorporated association, it goes into one of the legal entities, it comes back down. And deputies have, as individuals, have no access to either the corporate entities based on their position as deputies. Similarly, in reverse, there's no recognition at the moment of the HOs as a group in the constitution of the unincorporated association. The unincorporated association is governed by the executive. The HOs are mentioned individually, but the idea that there's this group of 5 people who are, who in conjunction with the board senior staff are running the organization day to day, are setting and executing policy, does not exist in the constitution. There's again a disjunct here. You can get to the exec, but you can't get any higher. And the other sort of fundamental point to make is that the current composition of trustees is quite a long way from what the Charity Commission, from the Charity Governance Code would consider to be best practice or possibly even reasonable practice. That trustees are supposed to be appointed such that the trust board has the necessary skills, necessary experience, necessary diversity to fulfill its roles. Obviously, our current crop of HOs are exceptional people and do that very well, but the process of election whereby you just, we just have a poll and elect the five people does not guarantee that that will happen. And we think it's
sorry,
necessary.
Ben, sorry, yeah. Can I just say, sorry to interrupt you, but we need to try to move along a bit faster.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I'm almost done.
Brilliant, thank you.
I'm almost done. And we're proposing to, enable a new process whereby trustees, whereby there's a process to appoint additional trustees, additional directors. This is something which, again, we're looking for approval in principle, that this is a sensible idea which should be adopted. It is something which the board has been asked to vote on before in 2017 when it approved the dissolution of the executive, the formation of the large trust board. Didn't happen at the time. We're bringing it back to deputies now. But the detail of it, the detail of the expansion of the trust board, the detail of what will happen to the executive, those are things which we are grateful to the many responses that were had as part of the survey, and which we plan to revisit in June. So what we're asking for, to first take questions and discuss, and then to put to a vote is, to let's go away and draft documents are as follows: dissolution of the unincorporated association, redistribution of its roles to charitable and charity company, revised governing documents, which will be slimline, which will have the legal essentials, but will let most of the things that's currently in the Constitution, so there's rules of standing orders, which we can adopt piecemeal and amend more easily. Revision of the various structures to clarify the split between charitable and non-charitable entities, and giving deputies status as part of one or both the corporate structures by making them members of these. This is, the board is a company limited by guarantee, but sort of a rough analogy is that everyone basically becomes shareholders. It gives you rights in terms of attending meetings, making resolutions, having access to paperwork and so forth. It does not, this is something that came up a few times in the survey, it does not put any restrictions on deputies' activities, on deputies' ability to express themselves and to act, however they feel in the context of the board. That will be very, very clear in the draft documents which will come back. The only thing that is asked of deputies is that in order to achieve these rights, they have to commit to guarantee the board for £1 of its debt. This is a nominal amount in order to, there is a legal transaction on it. I know that the members is one of the things that various people brought up in the survey. Happy to discuss that as well. I thank you all for your time and patience. I will now pass it back and see how we do with questions. I know there's not an enormous amount of time, and I'm very happy to just see what the mood is, and if people would rather spend more time and not come back straight away for a vote, would like to spend more time discussing it, that is perfectly fine by us, by myself, and by the Constitution Working Group. We just want to run a consensus-based process to deliver sort of a revised and amended set of governing documents that resolves some long-running issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ben. Can we now try to see if we can proceed with having the vote online? If for any reason this isn't possible, then we will have to email deputies during the week. But let's try, because I think we should congratulate ourselves for everything we've done for our first virtual meeting. So let's try and go for gold and try and have our first virtual vote. So would you like to take forward the first proposition?
I mean, I'm happy to take questions from deputies first if people have.
Okay. Yep.
I can't see who has questions.
I'm going to tell you, and you can choose. Lawrence Julius, Denise Lester, Jerry Lewis, Brian Mark, David Sello, and Roger Kuczynski. So you tell me who you would like first.
I will take them in order, except for Jerry Lewis, who I will move last because he's a member of the Constitution Working Group.
Very well.
Various chances to feed into this
very
process.
Well. And can I remind deputies that we are finishing at 1:15, and we have to manage our time carefully, otherwise we won't have time for reports. Although I've been told the honorary officers are happy to take questions offline. Okay, Lawrence Julius, thank you.
Hi, firstly, I'd like to thank Ben and his team for all the work they put in. They've done a tremendous job. The details of the changes to me were very patchy, and we've only had 3 days to look at them. The organisational changes make a lot of sense, but one change I would also suggest is we need an additional division to cover media and social media. This to me is the biggest driver of opinions, anti-Semitism and radicalisation, and one of the biggest challenges for us. And it really goes across all the 3 existing divisions, in defence, in international and in communities. So I think we really need to think about having an extra group devoted to that. The one area which I was unsure about, which came back from Ben, was how we make sure that the synagogues and the communities, which are approximately, I think, community membership's about 80% of the Jewish population of the UK, according to ONS. And we've got to make sure that they maintain that kind of control in the voting, that you don't get large numbers of small groups coming in and disproportionately distorting the voting and taking over what happens.
Thank you. I think I'll take all the questions and then feedback collectively.
Thank you. And the next person, please, is Brian Mark has now come up. You're next.
Denise Lester, South Hampstead Synagogue. Ben, thank you. Thanks everyone for the virtual meeting, and thanks His Excellency. And Marie, thank you so much for so ably chairing this. Ben, I want to congratulate you on the paper, but I just have a bit of a health concern, because we're discussing quite openly, as we should do, from a transparency and accountability point of view, issues including risk management and liability, which is on a custom live streaming service, so that the wider populace potentially could hear us. I'd like the paper, actually, in this item, to actually almost be taken offline at the web streaming site. We've got a complex road that we need to manage, and the board is managing it. Dealing with a membership issue, I actually, well, accountability wise, I'd like to know, you said it was a week's worth of legal fees. I'd like to know who's dealing with the actual transmutation of the documents, and I'd like us to see some costs, Ben, because it does affect the board's budgeting. Secondly, I'm concerned about the understand the lock-in in principle of board members becoming members, but I think that this is going to need to have lateral synagogal organisational approval and board approval, and there may need to be indemnity insurance put in place qua that as well. It's not an easy issue, and the problem with all of this is that the spend could overrun. To even draft documents is going to cost some thousands. It may be a necessary evil, but we need, from a cost financial perspective, need to plan forward for this. So I also think that this item ought to be taken off of a live stream if it's to be reconsidered, please, from the wider perspective. I don't want to those who are not well intentioned.
It's a very good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next person on my list, and we do need to move this along, and apologies, it's 1:30, we'll be finishing. Could David Sello has his hand up, followed by Roger Kuczynski. I'm sorry, Brian Mark was first.
Brian Mark, which is
Brian
perfect.
is first. Brian is first, then David, then Roger. It's just like waiting for the microphone. I'm sure Brian will be here shortly. We can't hear you, Brian. Could you please unmute? We can see you, but not hear you. We can't hear you, Brian. I'm afraid we don't have sound. We can try and come back to Brian. Shall we move on to the next person?
Hello. Hello.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome.
Right. Am I through?
You're through. You're loud and clear.
Yeah.
Can you state your name and your constituency,
Yeah, I'm David
please?
Steele from Brighton Hope Progressive Synagogue. I've got just a few questions. I broadly support the what we've heard. The first one is we're having a vote online today. I just want to check constitutionally whether we can actually have the vote. Our constitution allows us to do that, and it may be something we need to consider when we're drafting these doing the Constitution, about the online voting. Second question is about people who don't have access to digital, particularly some of our older members. How are we dealing with future consultation on that one? And my third question is, in light of the current crisis and all the restrictions, is the current timetable actually achievable, or does it need reviewing? That's
Thank you very much. That's great.
Can I mention, it doesn't look like we're going to be able to get to the virtual vote, and I suggest that we take the remaining questions. And Ben, would you be agreeable to arranging the vote electronically once we've resolved any further questions?
Very happy to. Yeah.
We do need to move this along, but just
of course,
to say
Marie, that's absolutely fine.
Okay, but just to say, deputies, we were in a position to have a vote on screen, and you would have seen how the votes were calculated, but we can save the prospect of an exciting vote, I'm sure, for next time. So can we take the
next time, Marie? Before next
time, we will find what we do is
8 weeks. Can't wait that long.
No, we won't be waiting that long. What we'll do is we will find a way to make sure that we can vote electronically. So we will move this along during the week. So can we have the next question, please? I see you've unmuted. Name and constituency. Oh dear, I can't hear sound. I still can't hear you, I'm afraid. I don't know if Brian can have one more chance of unmuting. Otherwise, we will. Sorry, Roger. We will take your question offline, and we'll take your question offline, Brian, as well. The last two people that want to ask questions are Jerry Lewis and Robert Stone. I think that because we are at 1:17 and we're supposed to finish at 1:30, I'm sorry, really sorry. Can we take questions offline? And I'm very happy to arrange, in fact, an extra Zoom session. I'm sure the honorary officers would, on the constitutional changes. And Ben, would that be agreeable to you?
That would be great if I could just very quickly run through the points that have been raised.
Right, if you would, very, very quickly. Thank you.
Yes, so first of all, on Lawrence's point, the divisional structure and in particular details of membership, those are things which we'll come back to. I would expect, I was going to say the June meeting, but we will see how much progress we managed to make in the meantime. The proposal for extra division is, I think, something that doesn't sit necessarily with the constitution. It's something for the HOs, the exec, the current divisions to consider whether it needs a separate division. It could be absorbed within their existing work. I note your point that the papers have only come up 3 days, and what I would say is that the proposals are entirely unchanged in this regard from what went out in February, that we have not added anything new to what was put to deputies on which received extensive feedback on these proposals. Denise, I absolutely take your point about risk management. I think perhaps if we come back to this in June, we should consider a sort of a closed session for the legal and government risks that will let us be more frank about things. The lawyer which we're currently engaging with is Joe Coleman of One Bourne Dickinson, who is a very well-respected charities lawyer, does a large amount of work in the community. She has quoted, but I believe she's quoted to the HOs, not to me personally. I would assume it's budgeted for in this year's budget. That is something you would have to ask Marie and Stuart about. But the point around overrun in particular is very much taken. It is better, however, to spend the money up front in a structured way to get the work accomplished than to have to go back and amend and redraft and fix because we went cheaper early on. The point around indemnity insurance and need to draft all these points around what does membership mean, what does it imply, is absolutely taken. That's something we'll pick up the lawyers. David, just again, in terms the vote we were asking for and what we'll do online is indicative. It doesn't have some constitutional impact. It's just for us to get a steer of how deputies are feeling. Online access more generally is something we work with in the Constitution. We had a setup to take response by phone call. When, you know, I had more than a dozen phone calls to take response in writing if necessary. We will use all the means that the board has to contact deputies to engage them in this process. As and when we get to the need to take legally binding votes, if we are still in this situation, the Charity Commission has guidance at the moment, which is basically do your best and document it and then tidy it up afterwards. I would hope that by the time we are a couple of months down the line, they will have something more concrete so we can have a physically correct thing.
Thank you.
There are ways to work around
it. Thank you, Ben.
very much.
Thank you. Can I just clarify? The Board of Deputies is a charitable foundation, and it's been an unincorporated association since time immemorial, which does have a lot of practical and legal implications. So what I suggest we do is we have a special Zoom session just so that we can have questions and answers on the constitutional changes, and then we can talk to you about indemnity insurance. There are certain aspects where you have to have different insurance for different entities. We've also got the Board of Deputies of British Jews Limited, so we can go through that at a leisurely pace. But I'd like to thank very much Ben for his question. One of the good things, deputies, about being virtual is that we can see on social media what people are actually saying. So I just want to address, whilst we're still online, something that Amos Shumfield, deputy, has tweeted. He has said, I'm sorry what, at Bod Pres and to my constituency JLGB, in order to promote the issues of young people, just called a letter of young leaders engaging in our community issues ageist. I'm done. So I'd just like to address that straight away, because obviously I wasn't in a position to comment then. I want to make it clear that comments about ageism were based on feedback by members of the deputies, older deputies on the board, who are also on the left. And also, people should, in my view, not be profiled on the basis of their age or indeed other protected characteristics. And it's my view that Amos has misunderstood what I've said. So I just want to be able to clarify that whilst we are online. We now have very, very little time. I will ask Stuart to present his report, and either we can take questions online, but I think we're all very concerned about the finances because of the coronavirus. So could I ask Stuart to unmute?
Can you hear me? Good. Deputies, apologies. Normally I'd be delighted to take questions directly, but on this occasion, please come to me with any questions offline. We'll deal with them. I'm going to get to the point. We've spent several years with the help of people in the Finance and Organisation Division and members of the senior management team and the HOs getting our finances into a fairly sound position. I think you're all familiar with that, and you can look at the numbers in the Treasurer's report. Whether we like it or not, the crisis is going to smack our ability to raise income in the mouth. We are making provision for that. We're going through a rebudgeting process. We have already found very substantial savings, but we actually don't have that much fat because of the efficiencies that we've introduced over the last few years. Nevertheless, the message I want to get across to you is that we are well enough provisioned and reserved to be able to get through this. We will get through this. We will do our utmost to avoid cutting the board's activities to the bone. And in fact, where we see, as I said in the report that was circulated, opportunities for strategic advantage, we will even expand. I, for example, was delighted to be able to support the President's initiative to expand our activities in the regions. Sarah Radovan's evidence of that. There may be more, there may not, but I can only encourage you to get behind the board's efforts to raise money, if it's at a local level with your synagogue or other organization or more broadly. And if you have specific and workable ideas for us to raise money differently or in ways that we haven't done so far before, get hold of me. Again, sorry not to be able to take questions on this occasion.
I've just been told, deputies, that there's a willingness and ability to actually slightly extend the meeting, and I just want to go back to Ben to see if he wants to take the opportunity to explain concisely just an indicative vote on the issues. But I want to make it clear that we are also very happy to also have an additional Zoom meeting to discuss at much greater length the constitutional changes. So if Ben feels that he's got very easy, straightforward issues where he would like just to have an indicative vote so that he can get a steer, I'm just going to quickly hand back to Ben. Ben.
Yeah, sorry, Maria, I lost you for a second when I was put back on the webinar. What we're asking what we're asking for from deputies is basically we want to be able to go out and take the time and incur the cost of drafting essentially new memorandum and article association for the two corporate entities that absorb the unincorporated association and which address the various other issues here. We are reluctant to do that unless we sort of have a pretty clear steer from deputies that this is something which when they come back, they will be accepted in some form or another after discussion, amendments and so forth. I am happy to put that to a vote at this point. And I think that's the sense of the HOs. I am also happy, even though what I will say is that if there's any willingness to have a follow-up meeting by Zoom in a week or two, I am happy to do that as well. I'm happy to take a vote now.
Yeah.
200 deputies in the room. And then as we start the process of drafting, to go through and to listen to the individual concerns and make sure they are picked up in detail and responded as part of the drafting process.
All right, we will try. Let's see how we go. We haven't got 200. Just to be clear for the record, we have 156 deputies in the room. So can we just proceed concisely to the issues that you want people to look at? I'm happy to read what's coming up on your screen, deputies. So I think this should be able to be something you can vote on. And again, if there's concern, we will have another Zoom meeting. One, do you approve in principle the Constitution Working Group's proposed reforms to the board's legal and core governance structures as outlined in the February 2020 consultation paper? And if you're confused, don't vote, and we will then see that we need a Zoom meeting on this. But if you feel that you can give an indicative vote, please do so, and then we will come up with the result on screen, I believe. Some people can't vote. I'm told one of the officers can't vote. Whilst we're waiting for that, I'll read you some feedback that we've had online. Again, it's quite interesting we can do this. Roger Giewolb says that the virtual meeting has been handled well in most parts. He doesn't know what others would say, but he thinks the experience wasn't quite what he was expecting because he raised his hand a number of times and wasn't called. Can we say again that we really apologise? It's not the technology. There were just too many people wanting to ask questions, so we weren't able to get to everybody this time. So again, I want to give my apologies to deputies. How are we doing on that vote? Can Judy Stilcoff please let me know? Well, I know that 68% have voted so far. It's now 107. So I'm just waiting to see if we can get further up. If not, I will ask for the vote to be on screen. I'm just waiting for Judy to confirm if there's anybody else who's voting. We're up to 73%. I'm going to say yes or no then. Can you please give us the outcome of the vote? 73% of deputies have voted. So you can see on screen, this is again a first. This indicative vote has been carried by 73% of deputies voting. by 88% and no was 12%. So thank you very, very much. So we've shared with you the poll results. Could we go on to number 2, please, Ben? And I will read the question if you put that on screen. That's enough to proceed, by the way, as an indicative vote on that aspect.
Thank you very much, everyone. And obviously, this is the start of a much longer process where we will be back and forth with all deputies, extensively. I think there's just the one question in the end.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, thank you very much. And I think it's a very positive step that we can have virtual voting and feedback from people as we go along. And deputies, apologies if I can't address all of your feedback and all of your comments, but we're doing our best to do so in this virtual world. I don't know whether Amanda, Edwin and Sheila, you want to say something very briefly, because it would be good if people can write to you offline, because we have run over, and I know that nobody is objecting to running over slightly today. So Edwin, would you like to, could you just give us a brief summary of your division?
Sure. So the report is in front of you, but just wanted to say that like yourselves, it took us a few weeks to adjust to the digital world, because my division is all about visits and exhibitions and meetings. So there was a little bit of a slowness, but I commend the staff and Judy in particular and the honorary officers for actually bringing us to this new world very quickly. And we had a division meeting last week, and there were 27 attendees. We were empowered. We handled it. It was handled beautifully, empowered by the energy that Lauren Kalis and Sarah Radivan and brought in towards the communities division, part of my division. And I think that you will find that by next report we would be covering a lot more communities, and we are thrilled, and we look forward to also the by-election participants also brought the energy, and I think you will find out by next time how well we've done. And I thank the staff, and I commend them for bringing us to this age. Thank you very much, Mr. President. And I bring the report in front of you. Anybody who wants to ask, will be offered.
Thank you. Sheila, would you like to quickly present your report? And thank you also for agreeing to take comments offline. We can't hear you, Sheila. We can't hear you. Can we go please to Amanda? Sorry about that, Sheila. Can we go to Amanda first, and we'll see if we can get Sheila back?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Deputies, much of our division's work over the last period has been focused on representing the Jewish community in terms of our coronavirus response. And my thanks go to David Katz, the Defence Division member and the board's medical advisor, who's been working tirelessly for us all, along with Daniel Elton from the professional staff team, who among all his other activities has been working with the burial societies to ensure that we can provide a daily report of the tragic results of the virus in terms of death. On Labour anti-Semitism, our strategy for what next was approved at the last division meeting, which was held just before Pesach and before the leadership elections. It's a long-term plan that we review quarterly. Look, as Edwin's already said, all our division meetings are taking place on Zoom now. So I want to remind all deputies that the next defence meeting is on the 11th of May. I'm happy to take questions from this report offline between now and then, but if any deputy wants to attend that meeting as an observer, please let me know over the next week or so. And you're very welcome to join us, and we can take some time at the meeting to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll just try Sheila again to see if we can get sound. Sheila, are you there? I'm very sorry. I think we've lost Sheila. I know that she really wanted to give her report, but I want to thank all deputies for this historic virtual meeting. And may I say that the tone and the nature of the whole meeting, the questions and the debates was really good. And I think that this has been an incredibly good experience. And I'd like to really thank all of you for your huge effort. Can I particularly also thank Leo Mindel for making this also possible, Judy Silkoff and the whole staff team, because this really is a first, and we've all adapted very well. So although we're isolated, we are in fact able to be together, which I think is a wonderful thing during the course of this terrible global pandemic. I'd like to say that I'd like you all to be well, to stay safe, and your volunteering, your spirit is truly remarkable, and everything that all of you are doing in your local communities and volunteering, this is really what matters. It's all about community, and we're here to represent the community. We don't always agree, but let's agree to disagree with respect and tolerance. And I want to thank you for joining us today, and we will arrange a follow-up Zoom conference on the Constitution. Gillian, I'd like to also thank in the whole of the coronavirus. She's worked extremely well with the staff team. They've really gone above and beyond, and I would like to thank them for their dignity in how the staff have had to deal with those anonymous comments in the press that happened previously. So deputies, thank you all. Thank you for joining us today. It's been, shall I say, an amazing virtual experience that's brought us all together. Thank you. Thank you. We're now going to leave the meeting, and I'm going to wave as well to all of you. I think that's very appreciated.